the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
And that's what I figure. It's just, I'm curious what teams would realistically be interested in that. I'm guessing you could probably build a package for a guy like Cease around Waldrop and maybe some combination of one of those young international guys. And, you know, because I get the sense Chicago is kind of understood. We're not anywhere close to being a contending team. Like, we need to just pick whatever.
Hold on. Let me stop you right there, John. Okay. You're assuming that Chicago has this long, drawn-out plan. This is something that baseball Twitter and other, like, the really smart people, this is what they forget. When I see listen to podcasts or I listen to them talk about, like, just, well, that doesn't make any sense for the Royals. Yeah, you have to operate on the assumption that you can out-duel the Royals in a trade. Like, why would the Royals do that? What do you mean? Have you watched the Royals? Have you watched what the A's have done? Like, you don't have to do a fair trade, because guess what? Teams make bad deals. Like, that's a strong possibility. You're like, why would they do that? It's like, and look, because they're bad.
The Braves already made that happen with Olsen and Murphy. You know, they gave up effectively nothing for either of those guys. Yeah, they could
get Dylan Cease for Dylan Dodd. Who knows?
That would be really funny. I think that's the thing with the Braves is you have this farm system. It's a lot of guys pretty far away from the minors, or from the majors rather. I don't think that's a deal breaker necessarily when it comes to getting a guy like Cease or Soto, or, well, they're not going to get Soto, or Cease or Glasnow or Logan Soto. Gilbert. Maybe there's not really a fit with Tampa, because Tampa so values those guys who are close to the majors, who are ready to produce right now.
I mean, AJ I think would be valuable. Like, I think they would sniff around Glasnow for AJ.
I think that's possible. I think that would be a hard sell for Atlanta, though, if only because I think Glasnow's a hard sell for a lot of teams, because one, that $25 million salary next season is just kind of bananas, and beyond that, obviously, is the fact that he is a free agent after next season. So you're really just getting the 1 year with him. And as you mentioned,
and he is 30.
He is 30. He has struggled to stay healthy. You know, I would be honestly kind of shocked if Glasnow drew. I think I could see Glasnow drawing a single top 100 prospect. Or maybe like 3 lottery ticket guys, depending on what the Rays are feeling. I'd be surprised to see any.
Why are we doing this? We know he's gonna be a Dodger. Like, we know Friedman and Tampa is gonna do something, and he's just.
I just feel like the Dodgers are more likely to focus their efforts on Ohtani and Yamamoto first, because all those guys cost is money, and the Dodgers have more of that than anybody.
Do you think they're getting one of the two for sure?
I can't say. I mean, it's impossible to know for sure, because, like I've said, Ohtani's free agency is a total mystery to everybody. Yamamoto similarly, in that he hasn't really expressed any preference as far as anyone can tell as to where he wants to be. It's not. We haven't heard that kind of.
Who was the random team that popped up for him recently? Or I was like, oh, what? They're preparing for. Who was that? The Yamamoto.
Well, the Yankees apparently have his number available, which means something only in the sense that the Yankees have like 5 numbers still usable at all. So it's kind of remarkable
when does that start?
That is a thing.
Like, we need to get to that point, John. When does that start, where we start unretiring, or we start allowing?
I think we're going to get to the point first where we start getting triple digits.
Or
maybe like a little asterisk, like someone wears a 7, but it's got an asterisk next to it.
Oh no, they have to give it up. Who gives it up first? Who's the first Yankee great to lose his retired number?
I'm not saying that if it happened to Derek Jeter, I would laugh myself into a coma. But if it happened to Derek Jeter, I would laugh myself into a coma.
I don't think you can go most recent. I think you got to stay away from that one.
Yeah, well, bad news for you, Whitey Ford. Did they even retire his number? I'm just.
It's a good question. I mean, 1 through 9 is what is available 1 through 9?
Nothing. I think the Yankees have retired every single digit number that their franchise has ever had.
Yeah, that's gotta. What are you doing? It's gotta go.
I think 0 is the only one.
Billy Martin can go. He's been fired 9 times. Like, he doesn't get number 1 anymore. No, you don't get to keep number 1, Billy Martin. So it's 1, 2, 3 for Ruth, 4 for Gehrig, 5 for DiMaggio, 6 for Torrey, 7 for Mantle, 8 for Berra and Bill Dickey, 9 for Maris, 10 for Rizzuto. So 11 through 14 are available. Then 17 through 19. It feels like you're trying to get a hotel. 22 is available. And granted, I say available. I don't know how many of those numbers are actually also currently being used. We know 99 isn't available. That's for sure. Maybe they'll just hand out 42 just to be dickheads. Like, that's... Yeah. Goodness gracious.
That
unretire it. And also, managers getting retired. Like, what are we doing? Joe Torre, great manager. You don't get one. Sorry.
That's fair. Look, I'm not going to defend anything the Yankees do, other than I think Monument Park is a cool idea for what it's worth.
Well, I have a question about the Yankees. Do you think Yamamoto makes sense? Because I feel like that one might be like the dark horse where I'm like, I could really see that. People are talking to themselves in the Mets with all kinds of stuff. I'm like, the Mets don't have a whole lot. I don't think the Mets are going to be as active this offseason. Money. And I just don't think the moves that they've made this offseason and the manager hire, everything screams they're pivoting to a soft rebuild.
You don't think signing Luis Severino is the sign of a team that is ready to go now?
Yeah, I think they're gonna wait it out for a couple of years with the Braves and the Phillies to fight it out. I think they overspent, and Cohen's looking at the landscape and he's like, I'm gonna let Stearns rebuild this farm a little bit, and we're gonna go through a couple gap years. We're gonna try, like, there are now sophomores at Ithaca College where they're like, hey, that was a good freshman year, but I don't really know what I want to major in. I'm gonna go travel Spain and Europe as for the next few months, and then I'll circle back and hopefully have a plan when I get back. I think the Mets are just like
the Mets are taking a gap year, is what you're saying.
Oh, 100%. I think the Mets are planning on a gap year.
I will say, I think to answer your initial question, Yamamoto makes sense for the Yankees, but I think that's because he makes sense for like 20 of the 30 teams in baseball. Honestly, I think he could make an argument that he makes sense for every team in baseball, primarily because of his age. I mean, there are a couple of things worth noting about Yamamoto, and here I'll point us back to the board over on Fangraphs, where we just released an update for the international professionals. If you're not familiar with the board or with our scouting stuff, Eric Longenhagen, our prospect guy, who's a very chill, cool dude, he is just super knowledgeable about all forms of scouting. He's watched a lot of Japanese, Korean, and other international league stuff, so he can give you we've got fresh scouting updates on Yamamoto, on Roki Sasaki, Munetaka Murakami, the top Korean free agent available this offseason, Jung-Ho Lee. But when it comes to Yamamoto, I think the most important thing we're noting, he is 25 years old. This is not a guy where he's coming over from NPB and you're only going to get maybe the last 3 or so years of his peak or of his good years before he, begins the soft, slow decline of his 30s. You've got, at minimum, if he stays healthy, 5 or 6 potentially ace Cy Young caliber seasons out of him. And granted, that is obviously going to be the most appealing to teams that are ready to win now, that want to add a number one pitcher to the top of their rotation. But if you're a team like, just for example, the Mets, even if you know that the next couple years are going to be maybe closer to, an 80 to 85 win team, like you said, maybe waiting for Atlanta and Philadelphia to duke it out a bit, let those teams wither a bit, then come back a little stronger when the farm system is stronger. You're not wasting any of his time at that point, because even if you're taking 2 years to just let the farm system develop, to rebuild the roster, he's still only going to be 27 years old by the time you do that. You're still going to have plenty of good years out of him, assuming he stays in good health. So, I can pretty easily make an argument for the Mets to do it. I can similarly make an argument for the Yankees. And it's also because you look at Yamamoto, he is, again, I keep talking about it because he is, I think, with Ohtani hurt, the best pitcher available on the market right now. I mean, from our Fangraphs scouting perspective, we gave him a future value grade of 65. Keep in mind, when you look at just overall prospects, that's the highest future value grade of any prospect in the minors. It's better than Jackson Holliday, better than James Wood, better than Jackson Churio, better than Dylan Cruz. Like, we are essentially saying this guy will be one of the most valuable players in the majors. One of probably the 20 best, at least one of the 20 best pitchers in the majors, if not one of the 25 overall best players in the majors, from the very first day he basically gets here. That can
there's
help
real no bust
team.
Potential with him.
I mean, there is, if only because obviously no one is immune to injury in particular. And the transition for Japanese pitchers, as we've seen, isn't always the simplest one, between the change in terms of rest days going from 6 to 5, in dealing with the differences in the ball and how because the Japanese ball is tackier, our ball is a little slicker, and how that affects your grip, particularly when it comes to breaking balls. With the change, especially with the change in terms of facing hitters and in terms of being in a league that has better scouting reports, better advanced scouting, harder stadiums to pitch in. It's not to say that Yamamoto is going to come here and immediately put up a 2.50 ERA and strike out 300 guys in 200 innings, but I think it's more to say that the upside with him is enormous, and the kind that, if he were available in the draft, he'd be the number one pick, instantly, easily. And if he were to be, who had the worst record in baseball last year? The A's?
Are you talking about this past year or the year before last?
Let's just say this past year for illustrative purposes.
I think it's the A's.
Yeah, it's either the A's or the Royals.
He would be the number one pick. Down below them they were close. I know they passed him at one point, but I think the A's finished at 50, Royals 56.
Okay, so he'd be the A's would make him the number one draft pick in a heartbeat. And you could make the argument pretty easily too that it's like he probably would be up to the majors within a year or two.
But he would also probably say no. Sorry.
Well, yeah, sure. But
no.
The point of it is any team really can make an argument for signing Yamamoto. I think when it comes to the Yankees specifically, on the one hand, sure, they have money. They could use another starter to go with Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon, depending on how they feel about what they want to do with Michael King, and if he's a guy they feel is ready to be a full-time starter, depending on what they want to do with Clark Schmidt in a similar vein, depending on whether Nestor Cortez is healthy. I think it's less likely for the Yankees to go that route, though, if only just because they have invested so much money in Cole and Rodon. I think the argument you can make for Yamamoto is that he then becomes that bridge for them to the next existing Yankees core, whatever that looks like. Because, and this is, a quiet thing to note about the Yankees, this is a pretty old team. With the exception of some of the younger guys who have not really proven themselves or who have not really looked major league caliber yet, you've got Aaron Judge, who's closing in on 32. You've got Cole, who's now 33. Rodon is 31. Again, like even the guys like I've just mentioned, King and Clark Schmidt, they're both 28 and almost 28 respectively. Obviously Stanton is 34. Anthony Rizzo is 34. DJ LeMahieu's 35. Gleyber Torres is 27, but this is probably his last year as a Yankee. He hits free agency next year, and it's kind of hard to see him coming back. This is a team that needs to get younger. So in that respect, I can see Yamamoto making a lot of sense. I just think in particular when it comes to the 2024 Yankees, there's one player, well, the one player makes the most sense for them as a free agent is Shohei Ohtani. I think far and away he's the one that makes the most sense for them in every respect. But I can see them pivoting to Yamamoto if they feel like Ohtani's not a realistic possibility. I do think ultimately, though, that the guy on this free agent market that they're probably, if you had to give me any one guy I said he has the best odds of being a Yankee, probably Cody Bellinger.
That's sad. I don't think Yankee fans are ready for that.
Well, I think it makes sense from a roster construction standpoint of one, he's a left-handed power hitter, which that team desperately needs. There are basically no left-handed power bats on the Yankees.
Go. Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.